We're in. Welcome to DiversiTV, Season 4. Tonight's show is an Anglo perspective on whiteness and white privilege. I can speak. English is my first language, though. If you're just tuning into DiversiTV, welcome. If you're tuning in again, part of our growing legion of viewers, welcome back. Just to give you an overview of our mission is to illuminate everyday diversity issues and give the mic and the camera to those who don't always get it. To that end, our season, this is our 4th season, roughly corresponding with LCC terms. Our first show was last week with Native Perspective, Warner Austin. This week is Anglo. Next week, we anticipate an African American perspective. Latino on the 7th of May, after Cinco de Mayo et al. May 14th, Asian. May 21st, gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, queer questioning, intersex, two-spirit. May 28th, disability. June 4th, youth. And June 11th, we'll look at class. And June 18th, spirituality and religion. And oftentimes, depending on the schedule of our guests, we may mix and match those. But this is basically as we anticipate the schedule coming up. Previous seasons' Anglo perspectives asked the question, for example, and Ruth, our guest tonight, was part of that original panel. What would a non-racist, non-sexist, non-homophobic, egalitarian white culture look like? We visited Lifting the White Man's Burden. We looked at Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack. We looked at white women's perspectives on feminism. And tonight we look at whiteness and white privilege. Now, this is obviously not a perspective that you necessarily see on conservative news network, CNN, or Fox News. But we decided, because it is part of regular diversity work, if you go to slides, so for example, The White Man's Burden, this is part of the cartoon that actually appeared with the original Rudyard Kipling poem, which basically shows a Teddy Roosevelt U.S.-like figure carrying a stereotypical black savage up the hill to the schoolhouse, which is, flying the American flag, right? And, the white man's burden, basically, as defined by the dictionary, referring to the poem by Rudyard Kipling, who brought us the Jungle Book and all those other kinds of things, the supposed responsibility of whites to civilize the non-white peoples of the world. So whiteness, when we study it, and when I study it, for example, my ethnic studies class, which will start up again in the fall, we look at what it is and look at the historical context. So we begin to look at the whiteness really starts before 1619. We can definitely say that. And some of the earliest writings can actually go back to, say, the papal bulls of 1493. In which they basically said that any Christian person, which basically Christian meant white, then, who discovered, previously non-Christian lands, could claim those lands for all of Christendom, and even if the people of color who lived in those lands converted to Christianity, they lost the land forever. Period. And so there was a Supreme Court decision to heirs of Thomas Jefferson who inherited land from Indians, and one bought the land from the government, and another bought the land from the Indians. Who owns the land? Supreme Court basically said, well, the Indians lost the title to the land because they'd been discovered in 1492. So, well, that was convenient. So, so when we, look at that, go back to slide, if you would. Thank you. In 1640, the legal precedent was set that a black man can be indentured for life. Now, what happened was indentured servants at the time, this is like a form of slavery where you basically paid for your passage. So this person was a free black person from England or Europe who came over, was working as an indentured servant in the Virginia colonies, and he and some white cohorts who were also indentured servants ran away. They got caught. the white guys got free, but the court basically decided that the black man not only could be put back into indentured servitude, but that indentured servitude would be permanent for him. And the whites basically just had to work out the rest of their indenture, which was like a matter of a decade or less. But the black guy was now permanently indentured, which now set up the whole thing about, the piece with looking at privileges going along with skin color when you start out with equal circumstances. So from that point of view, when we look at other foundations that then begin to look at, like, for example, in 1676, it's legal to enslave Indians. In 1680, white Christians are allowed to give any Negro or other slave 30 lashes for raising a hand to a Christian. 1705, Virginia forbids whipping white servants naked. So already we're starting to set a precedent here based on skin color. So all property owned by black slaves confiscated by church sold to poor whites. Then requiring masters at the end of to give white servants at the end of their servitude corn, money, gun, clothing, 50 acres of land, and reduced poll tax. So again, now whiteness as property right then begins to be enshrined. And so now it's not just an invisible, tangible, invisible set of privileges, is actually conferring benefits and financial advantage. Let's see. I'm going to actually skip a whole bunch of things because I want to get into our conversation. We can refer to this later because there's tons of stuff we could talk about.
Yeah.
So our guest tonight, go to slide. So Ruth. Ruth Wren provides workshops and classroom presentations on undoing racism and privilege, founded the Undoing Privilege and Racism Training Collective. She previously coordinated and facilitated study circles on race here in Eugene. She's the administrative coordinator for the women's program at Lane Community College. She received her BS in Psych from the University of Oregon, and she's the author of the essay, Everywhere I Go, I'm White, Facing the Responsibility of Privilege. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
So, where are you from, and where'd you grow up?
I grew up in upstate New York in the suburbs of Albany, and in that little microcosm, mostly everybody was white, with a few exceptions. I left there immediately after graduating high school and moved to the Bay Area and lived in Berkly for 25 years. So I suddenly, things opened up quite a lot, and I saw lots of people from many places and began to learn more about different people. And then I moved to Eugene in '94, and again was very clearly a mostly white environment. So I think those three chunks of time and the different ways that I felt and people that were in my life or not in my life is partly responsible for why it became such an urgent issue for me over time.
Yeah. So, how did you begin to become aware of the issue of systems of privilege, in particular white privilege, of course, but other systems too?
Well, actually, and I write about this in the essay, it started at Lane Community College.
Really?
In a real tangible way, it started here because I was taking a class and became friends with the only other person in the class who was roughly my age, also from the Bay Area, a lot of similar interests in Vipassana and the stuff we read and the music we liked and stuff, and he was a black man, is a black man. And so we started having these conversations, partly because I really wanted to talk to somebody about these things that I had been thinking about. And a lot of the white people that I wanted to have that conversation with didn't want to have that conversation. And my friend...
Common reaction.
Yeah, it's like, ugh, what are you doing?
Yeah,
you know, why are you asking me that? So, but I was still pretty oblivious myself. And so I started asking him, I used to say, so is it okay to talk about diversity? You know, because I knew it was kind of asking him a lot to go there with me. But he was very patient for the most part, and we had some really intense and really frank discussions. And I think, and after some period of probably about 4 or 5 months of this, you know, after class or whatever, you know, getting into that, he said, you know, you really need to go do your own homework. You know, you've done some I can see, or we wouldn't be talking, but go take it from somebody else. Just don't take it from me, because I'm the only black man you're talking to right now, you know.
So there's a couple of things within that statement there.
Yeah.
That one, we're talking because you've done homework.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right. I
Okay.
have since then. Yes,
Right,
I have.
right. Well, even before then, to even
Yeah.
have the conversation to be able to broach it, because
Yeah.
most people, you know, your reaction, or other white people's reaction to the same topic, which again, you know, since we're both diversity trainers, one of the things we notice is that who has credibility to talk about this? One. Two, when some of the reaction is like, why are you talking about this? And, you know, are you a traitor? Do you hate yourself? Is this like liberal guilt? You know, you're abasing yourself to do, you know, what is all that, right? And there's a lot of misunderstanding, and so you go through this process that's uncomfortable.
Oh yeah.
Right? But then you get to a place where that changes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that the combination of, first of all, the desire to go towards something painful.
Yeah.
Then a relationship, hopefully, somebody that you value and respect so much that when they say things to you that don't make sense with your programming, with my programming, I can't go away and just dismiss what this person's telling me, because I respect this man too much, you know. And then, and he was wise to do it, you know. One of the books I started reading was Privilege, Power, and Difference by Alan Johnson.
Yeah. We brought him here once.
Yeah, he came to Lane. I got to meet him and talk about his effect on me. And for some reason, I was reading this, and I don't know what. I mean, I was studying it deeply. But there was a point, and I don't know what sentence or chapter it was, where it was. I describe it like a conversion experience, like I broke open. And it's like a religious conversion experience, because you begin to see things that you did not see before.
Yeah.
And there is some element of grace to it. It's like it happens. And it's you can't force it to happen, but it will happen when there is maybe the perfect storm, the phrase people like.
Grace in the sense that it is hyper-rational, beyond rational, and, you know, some set of whatever, you know, the egg cracks open.
Yes, yes.
Oh,
and
wow.
the grace also, because it is a healing. It's a healing of a wound, a scar, but also an active wound that's in me and goes back. How many generations does this go back? Your introduction. It goes back to your introduction. You know.
Yeah.
And I'm half German and half Dutch, and you know, I could try to sidestep, well, but my people came over here, you know, before World War II. But I'm still connected to those stories. I'm still connected to the Dutch and their conquests. But I think the breaking through, the changing myself from how I saw, because it's so connected to my identity. You look in the mirror and what do you see? And who is that?
Yeah,
Do you like that person? Is that person strong enough to be challenged without falling apart? Maybe are you strong enough to change what you used to think and say, I actually don't know, and go to that Buddhist place of not knowing. I thought I knew what it meant to be an American or to be Ruth. And here it's all up for grabs now. I don't know anymore.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, and caught up with that idea of the identity of American. You know? I mean, just with that whole piece around, like, the American flag, and what does it mean to be an American, and why are you wearing or why are you not wearing an American flag, and, you know, for the first time, I'm proud of my country. Oh, I've always been proud of my country. Okay, well, maybe you haven't been burned. You don't get that. You know, it's like maybe there's a reason for people feeling the way they do about the flag and people wearing the flag and who is not. Let's not forget that there is an American flag at every Ku Klux Klan cross burning, and y'all don't put them down, Americans. So how is that? That's how, lots of good things have been done by the American people with the American flag too. But guess what? There's some pain, and it's not unpatriotic to say, look, I love America, but America don't always love me back. So, right.
Well, and I think it goes back to the original schizophrenic nature of the birthing of this country with most of the early presidents were slaveholders. Thomas Jefferson, Ben Franklin, Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death. He's a slaveholder, and so how does that get reconciled with the home of the brave and the land of the free and all that rhetoric when we have slaves, when we've stolen land, when we've committed genocide on Native Americans and...
Oh, but that was a long time ago.
Yes,
land
it was.
Of, as KRS-One would say, land of the thief, home of the slave. Right. I mean, so just like, in the intro when we were talking about, there was a time when Christian meant white and white exclusively, and there was a time that, we the people, as written, did not, it basically meant white people only. And so there is that whole rubric of American means white, and red-blooded American. It's like, well, all humans have red blood, so what does it mean to be red-blooded? And we find, you just scratch the surface a little, that's referring to a Ku Klux Klan dictum of you need to prove your racial purity by being white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, and that's why they wear the red blood drop to prove their racial purity. That's what red-blooded American means, right? So people don't really investigate that, right? They just hear these phrases and, I'm a red-blooded American. Well, everybody has red blood, so what does that mean you mean?
Yeah, and I suppose they haven't come to terms with the fact that race doesn't exist as a biological genetic category.
Yeah, right. Right.
It's so crazy making,
Yeah, but... So, within, when you become aware of the systems of, issue of systems of privilege, and you wrote, part of your piece is talking about what are some responsibilities of privilege. So what are the responsibilities of privilege?
Well, I think there's several pieces
in this new
to
awareness where you had, you've had the grace, you've had the revelation.
Yeah.
So.
You can't go back.
Yeah.
Well, so you can backslide. That's true. I would say that it's a continual process, the understanding that it's a lifelong process that involves regular self-reflection, because I have been indoctrinated from early childhood too, especially, seeing all those white faces and then seeing a person of color and having all the questions that kids have, I mean, we internalize it too, we internalize the messages of white superiority, whether we want to or not. And so you have to continually examine your own thoughts, and it's painful because I would like to think now that I've committed myself to doing workshops on, basically it's workshops for people to undo privilege and racism, and the fact that I'm white gives me more latitude to do those kinds of workshops. But nevertheless, no matter how committed you are, how much work you've done, that it's ongoing, and so there's some humility there, a commitment to continue to study and read, because the body of work is growing, and the bigger it gets, the better it gets, and the more articulate I can be, and to change some of the stereotypical thinking in my mind, for example, to when we have committees, of course the committees have to be diverse. We can't call it a complete committee unless it's diverse. We need leadership of color, and it's not like a competition. It's a learning to be collaborative, to get to all this work on privilege is to get to the vision, the cherished vision of the beloved community of allies. And, you know, for us and also for all our children and our grandchildren, they don't come into this with this baggage full of racism. In fact, when dealing with children, I think it's more wise to focus on what we have in common and how fun it is, that there's, you know, you can, depending on the appropriate age, nature has all different sorts of things and we're part of nature, and, you know, fill them with that first, and then when they get to a certain point, they'll have some security in this diversity is healthy, and then when they get the bad news about this as it shows up in their life, you know, then hopefully the adult community will help them age appropriately come into this work.
Yeah.
So, so a commitment to working with people of color and working with other white people and on a continual basis in an appropriate way that doesn't shame and humiliate white people, but acknowledges that we were all born into this and we didn't ask for it. And like there's different ways of being white, you know, and we can be consciously white. And we can be proud of our European ancestry and the good things that our people have done and the beauty of the cultures and the arts of our people, as well as admire and respect everything that is to be offered from African music, for example. Huge, huge gift that came to this continent from Africa via music. And you know, anyway, from many places. I mean, from the South, we got many beautiful gifts, and from the people who were here when we came here, we did. And so I guess it's a way of training our minds to be comfortable with multiple perspectives, not struggle with who is right, but listen, let people speak their mind and give their teachings, and maybe the next person has a completely different teaching, and maybe there's some clashing. Well, let's get comfortable with that too, you know, and enlarge ourselves individually and as a community to for the better of us all. So because it's not okay until it's okay for everybody. That's the vision, you know. I know it's an ideal vision, but it doesn't mean that it's not a vision we're striving for.
So those multiple points of view, let's look at that ladder that you sent me earlier. Now, where this came from, y'all, is from, well, why don't you explain the ladder?
Well, it's from a group of trainers. You can visit their website, dismantlingracism.org, and this is from an essay written by Tima Okun, who's one of the trainers in this collective of trainers. And she's a white woman who has done a lot of work, and in her essay she makes the point that many people came together to bring together a lot of knowledge around what kind of process was it for them as they grew in their consciousness from complete oblivion to, as her, I like hers, the ultimate,
the top of the ladder.
Yeah, community of love and resistance. I think that's, I usually say the beloved community of allies, but I like that resistance part. So she has an essay which describes this in a lot of detail, but you can just look at this ladder itself and we can just talk about it from our own experiences about what these stages are.
So go back to slide again for a second. So at the very bottom, pan down to the bottom where it says, I'm normal. Okay? So, you know, for example, you know, the famous Brown v. Board of Education doll study of the Clarks, where basically black kids and white kids are asked to pick out, okay, which doll is smarter, which doll is prettier, and the black kids are picking out the white doll as being smarter and prettier, and the black doll is not being, right? So whiteness, where we talk about white privilege, is basically, you know, a system that starts with the educational system and grounding some of these beliefs where, you have basically one race superior to others rather than, say, the indigenous view of the people of the four directions, where you have, which, you know, some we've talked about in this program before, but for those of you who are just tuning in, so biologically, as Ruth talked about, and so one of the foundations of the work is to understand, okay, biologically there's one race, the human race. And the way that we know that is because we can all mix and basically have, you know, kids that are viable offspring, and phenotypically, that is, you know, there's what's in the genes, right? So we all have the same genes. So the common mother, Lucy, way back in Africa.
Yeah.
And then at various times, various phenotypes, the physical type showed up, right? So phenotypically, white people are the last people to emerge, like 22,000 years ago, because you can't have Europeans without a Europe, right? And basically, you got glaciers and all that kind of stuff covering up most of Europe, so boom, 22,000 years ago, they show up, right?
Yep.
And so, you know, native people like pre-Columbian, pre-1492 basically had a concept of the people of four directions, so along with the four classic elements. So the people of the East is the yellow race, they're the air element. The people of the South, the black race, are the water element, the emotion. So air is the mind, water is the emotion. Okay, the people of the West, the native people, okay, are the earth element, right? And the people of the North, the white people, are the fire element. And so each one of those has a different quality, different way of looking at the world, and different technologies based on the way of looking at the world and the civilizations that they construct. And so they all have common values, and basically the way the story goes is that each one of them have a piece of the truth. It's their piece of the truth, but it's only a piece of the truth. And the whole truth can't be known until they all come together and share what they know. So within this construct of race, so you construct ideas of race to either, in that particular model, North is not superior to South, East is not superior to West. There's simply directions, right? There's no inherent idea of racial superiority. Unlike the constructs that came out of Europe because of a particular conquest mindset, where you basically say Caucasoid, Mongoloid, Negroid, and that leads to what we call the Federal Five. So basically, Caucasoid being, you know, Caucasians being on the top, and then Mongoloid devolving from them, and then Negroid devolving from them, you know, within this whole mythology based on a particular version of the Bible, which we now inherit as our Federal Five construct of race, with then inherited racial bias too, right? So then that stuff gets reinforced. So we could say, well, yeah, other people have racism too. You know, Asian people are racist against other Asians, right? And so you can construct other constructs that make your particular group superior or not. So the point is not, you know, okay, white people are bad for creating racism. No, it's just this particular form, this particular context. If we get to an older piece, they weren't always like that. They weren't. You know, we could all get along back in the day, and so basically seeking to recreate that, right? So that piece about I'm normal, right? Go back to slide, okay? So that piece about I'm normal, and you reinforce that through the education by only talking about the founding fathers and, you know, founding mothers and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. I'm normal. And then the next level is, you know, what are you? You know, and that's frequently what, you know, first contact. Like, I'm normal, you're an alien. And our language about that. Illegal alien. So, I mean, that, you know, that has become racialized to the point of, well, and we can talk about this in a white privilege context. Okay, you say illegal aliens, and it's like the conversation is about 12 million Mexicans and not about 500,000 illegal white people and you know, Europeans and Canadians who are also here illegally. And, you know, I was talking with this woman in D.C., you know, in the airport, and she said, yeah, we have a couple of illegal Canadians. They're pulling down $50,000 a year. They're here illegally. It's kind of a joke within the office. And go, really? Yeah. Right, 500,000 of them. So how come INS ain't looking for them?
Yeah, that reminds me, I have a friend who's Asian American. She's 5th generation, and she's constantly being asked, where are you from?
Yeah.
Or what are you?
Or what are you?
Or
right.
where are you from, really?
Yeah.
And we may be together when that's happening. I am 3rd generation. My grandparents were immigrants. Nobody ever asks me, what are you? Or did you come from Canada? Or whatever, some European country. So that's a nice example, I think, of, you know, because I have this color skin, I'm an American, and somebody who looks different, well, you get to ask them a bunch of questions.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
you get to invade their privacy,
yeah.
and they're supposed to explain themselves to you. I mean, they said, "Well, I was just curious. I didn't mean it like that," and that may be true, but that's about the self-reflection. Is that really true, or would you like an explanation from that person? And why do you feel that you have a right to expect an explanation?
Well, it goes back to the bottom part of the ladder. Well, I'm normal, and the next part of the ladder is, you know, be like me. We're all the same. You're the problem.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Right? And so, you know, it's a level of awareness where, you know, I mean, I've been asked, you know, actually by an Asian woman one time, you know, what are you? Right?
Oh, yeah.
And so I go, I'm an American. She goes, you don't have an American face. You know, like we're sitting in this hot tub, you know, at this hot springs outside of LA, right? So I'm just bubble. What do you mean? I don't have an American face. I said, what do you mean I don't have an American face? She says, your face is relaxed. Snap. Okay, so yeah, the uptight American, stereotypical white person, you know, like, you know, the Asian view of, you know, she's Korean, you know, South Korea, at the local military base, you know, in Riverside County. It's like, right, you know, the stereotypical ugly American uptight, always in a hurry, you know, and my face is relaxed, even though, wait a minute, I'm born in the Haight-Ashbury and raised in South Central LA. How American can you get? Maybe that ain't mainstream what George Bush says, but, you know, like Iowa's mainstream America and South Central ain't. But, okay, whatever. Another subtext there. Let's go back to slide. So then you basically try and correct people on that, and then up the ladder it says denial and defensiveness. I'm not the problem. Okay, and then the next stage when we talk about guilt and shame. White is not right, I'm bad. You know, and that's a lot of people's reaction when you start talking about whiteness and white privilege.
Yeah, and I can identify with each one of these, which is why I think this is so excellent as a model. And that guilt and shame really slams you, because after you've been through maybe a lifetime of, you know, what are you, be like me, denial and defensiveness, and then you drop that shield.
Yeah.
I mean, like, emotionally or psychically, or it's devastating. Yeah. Because you realize that, you know, geez, I thought I was a good person. I am connected to all this, and even that's not just that stuff that happened a long time ago, but I'm connected to it now. Yeah. And you know,
and it's happening now.
Yes,
it's not just
yeah. And it is overwhelming. Right. And I talk about this in the essay too, because I almost left it out, and then I thought, you can't leave that out. It was months when I was walking around that I could not look a person of color in the eyes without crying. I mean, it went deep, you know, and it felt foolish, because I felt like, oh yeah, right, I'm gonna like go up to them and say, please forgive me, you know, I'm really sorry, I didn't mean it, I didn't know. Yeah. But then I thought, well, maybe I'm trying to forgive myself, you know, trying to find a way to work beyond this. But I actually have talked to quite a few other white people who described a very similar experience, which I'm excited about, because if it gets to you at that deep of a level, you really are transforming. Yeah. And you're swimming upstream, you know, because the culture is going to keep trying to push you back down the ladder. Right. There's going to be, you know, people are going to be like saying, you fall. You feel threatened, you know, like somebody comes at you with something that and you're like, oh my God, all that old stuff was true, you know, they're all like that or something, and you fall back into some old stereotype that you picked up, who knows how old you were. But this whole guilt and shame, and what I also would add to this is grief, is an important piece in pushing through. Stay there long enough to really feel that pain and grieve all those losses, all those cultures, all the people who have been sacrificed to this racialized hierarchy so unjustly, you know. But move through it.
Yes.
So then all this intense pain and anguish can be like can be logs to throw on the fire to then push you into the motivating to, okay, but what's beyond this?
Yes.
And not do this alone. You know, when you come apart to that extent, when you deconstruct to that extent where you can't even look a person in the eyes anymore, you really need some help with coming back out of it.
Yeah.
And it's great because we can, because
Yeah.
there are people who are doing this work increasingly. So
So
yeah.
the next level then, open up acknowledgement. Houston, we've got a problem.
Yeah.
Right? And then being able to, okay, so going beyond guilt and shame. Okay, there's an awareness that something is wrong, and I'm part of it somehow, but I don't want to own it because that was a long time ago, and I'm not necessarily aware of, well, it's not a long time ago. The reason even people of color bring up history is to show, okay, this has been going on for a long time. It's still happening now. And it'll continue happening in the future unless we do something about it now. You're a part of that. So acknowledging, okay, yeah, we got a problem. No, we have a problem.
Yes.
And you're not bringing it up to blame me. You're bringing it up as a piece of awareness saying, we got a problem. We got to solve it together.
Yeah, that's
So
the difference.
the next, being around in the 70s where, diversity training was making white people feel guilty and, to the degree that that was fun, because it was coming out of pain.
Yes.
Like, hey, I want you to feel my pain.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, great, now we both hurt. Can we go beyond that? Took us a long time to get out of that. And, okay, guilt is a terrible motivator. It doesn't work, right? They feel guilty, but they don't change.
Yeah, it freezes you. It immobilizes you.
So taking responsibility and self-righteousness. White can do right, especially me.
That's the self-righteousness of the converted.
Yes,
it's like, I'm one of the good ones.
Yeah.
Don't you like me now?
Right.
See, I can dance or whatever.
Right.
So, but it's a good, getting there is better than the lower phases of it, and it's sort of like there's joy in it because now there's hope for healing, and you're sort of full of yourself at that point.
Yeah.
And you can say some embarrassing things and feel that you're better than other white people who don't get it. And I've even been guilty of saying that to somebody like, yeah, so and so they don't get it. But of course I do. Well, you can only stay there only so long until you make some really stupid mistake and say something in front of people that reveals how much more work you have left to do.
Boy, have I done that, Eating crow.
Yeah.
What recipe will we have? Will you have your foot with that?
Yeah. Exactly.
So, taking responsibility, self-righteousness, and then taking collective action from that awareness. And then the community of love and resistance, unlike the Borg, resistance is futile. No, resistance is fertile.
Yeah.
Or as Alice Walker told us, resistance is the secret of joy.
Yeah.
So, okay. So within this particular framework here, that collective responsibility. So what are the pitfalls in doing this work as an individual and as part of a group?
Let's see. The pitfalls. Well, certainly part of it is just working intensely with any small group of people. You have different styles, and in the Uprooting Privilege and Racism Training Collective, which is 4 people now, we have different ways we'd like to go about doing things, and I think it sort of extends to even among white people, or the multiple perspectives thing, the honoring. Well, I really think that it will be a better workshop if we do it this way. But here's my buddy over here who I want the desks lined up like the classroom style, so I can walk down the front and the small groups can see each other. My friend wants them in a big square so that we can all see each other at the same time. You know, little stuff like that. And so, you know, discussions about the relative merits. Well, if it's in a big square like that, then this person is too far away from that person. So, and you feel it getting a little bit heated because this is now a big part of our work. It's a big part of who we are. We want it to go well, you know. Yeah. And some combination of, which you need to do in any working group, being strong in yourself and loving yourself in your own way of doing things, and at the same time being able to say, well, okay, let's try it my way or your way first, then we'll have a discussion and we'll try it the other way, and then we'll have the discussion and stuff. So I think that's been a bit of a challenge. Also, anytime you're in a group, then there's, okay, what do we do first? What's most urgent? How do we approach it? You know, which is also true in any group. So the good news is that there's so much excellent material out there that when folks are sincere, even if you make a few mistakes, it's fine. It's all part of the growing up together thing. And then you go, well, we're not going to do that again, are we? You know,
or we might. And you know, I mean, when we look at, especially doing work on privilege, okay, and noticing that there are privileged systems, right? And so, what does upper middle class heterosexual black male privilege look like? Right? So I can look at that and, okay, well, male privilege allows me to interrupt any woman, right? Even the president in conversation, right? The fact that she has power, you know, can maybe, you know, ultimately fire me or at least decide to hire me or whatever, right? That's one piece, but, you know, there's combinations where you can see people in a coalition of group and see different aspects at play. I mean, I remember seeing this, you know, at, you know, the run-up to the Obama rally, and basically, you know, we were trying to do a piece for DiversiTV, trying to get an interview with him, right? And so I was at this meeting with this, you know, collective of folks, and it's like, okay, so the white guy is like using the volume of his voice to shout down this man of color who's quietly speaking and respectfully saying, okay, look, okay, well, I respect your point of view, but I mean, this is collective action, and you know, you're uncomfortable with it. Is anybody else? Nobody else is uncomfortable with it. You're uncomfortable with it, so we're supposed to defer to you. Why? Because we're here for this black male candidate, and like, how does this white man get played by out-shouting this man of color? So watching that little dynamic go in there, like, okay, so I'm just like, okay, so white boy think that he's intimidating us because he's talking loud, because that ain't flying, right? And so black male, you know, am I going to jump and say, you're being racist and sexist, brother? No. You know, no, that's not going to play out.
Might not work.
It might not work, right? And he just, you know, he might get defensive, and then it becomes about, you know, me personally attacking him when it, you know. So, I mean, it resolved itself. He just decided to go away and play elsewhere. Okay, cool.
Well, one of the things I could say about pitfalls is whenever we walk into a group, a new workshop or a classroom or anything, I can see the fear in the faces of people there. Of course, it's really scary. What are these people going to do to me or say to me? Am I going to have one of those horrible, you know,
diversity training moments?
So one of the first things I always say after the preliminaries is that I know that you're all good people. You know, you're here to work on this. That takes a huge amount of courage, and I want to reassure them that it's not my job to judge or make them feel guilty or blame them. You know, I'm just glad they showed up, you know.
Yeah.
And so we want to create a safe space where there's confidentiality. We make agreements, you know, we can talk about issues outside of here, but we will not talk about names outside of here. And once people, it's funny, even just that one phrase, I know that you're all good people, you can almost hear the room exhale.
Collective sigh.
So I say, you know, and all of us are struggling with this stuff because it's totally crazy making, and especially in hard economic times where there's layoffs all over, there's, you can be privileged without feeling privileged, you know.
Right.
And you get laid off, you're certainly not going to be feeling very privileged.
No, not at all.
But yet, if you examine the statistics and the wealth gap and the power gap and the achievement gap, and you listen to people's stories, that's still all there, you know. So I think that's one of the things, is that just broaching the discussion is often really frightening, and the more we do it, the better we get at it. The last one, there was a woman of color there, and she was only going to stay. It's mostly white people. One woman of color. She wasn't going to stay. She was just going to sort of
observe,
visit, and then leave. And then one of the trainers invited her to join the group, and she decided not to leave, which just made me so happy.
Did she say?
Yeah, she said, because I felt safe and I'm intrigued. I want to have this conversation. So to me, I mean, that's a real indication that something good is happening here, and it's very simple. It's very low tech. You know, a few handouts, some exercises, small group exercises. We do some clips from Race the Power of an Illusion, 1, 2,
the PBS
and 3.
movie or whatever. Yeah.
Still, the single most valuable video tool that I've come across, because they have the historical piece down, and they're mostly scholars of color, not all, but mostly. Expressing it really well, and they have footage from the 1904 World's Fair, you know, and they where people of color were on display, the Philippines tribes, and they had Geronimo there,
like
signing
living
autograph.
dioramas.
Yes.
I mean, if they could have gotten away with killing and stuffing them, they would have done that, but they didn't. They're like as if they're zoo exhibits.
Yes,
right?
yes.
And so, no, you didn't have the typical English family up there on display either. It was the primitive
The other.
ones. The other, right?
And so you see the photos.
What are you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's very powerful. I'm just put a plug in for
Yeah.
that. You go to California Newsreel and you can purchase that for your organization, and it's really transformational.
Yeah. Yeah. And so in terms of your collective work, why collective? Why did you name yourselves a collective?
Well, I realized that there's only so much that I can learn or do, or only in terms of the way I express myself, that I'm only one, and we're always stronger when we're with a group. So we're a collective because although the current framework for the workshop is the one that I started by myself and continue to use, which I'm very proud of. But we're a collective in the sense that I'm not the leader. You know, other people are having ideas, and we're going to modify that, and it's going to grow and have additions and change with the needs of the groups that we are working with, and with the insights and ideas and experiences that they bring to it. So I just love it because, most of the places we go in our life, there is a hierarchy. There's a hierarchy here still, and we all know what it is.
No.
Every college has a hierarchy.
Say it isn't so.
And so we thought, well, it would be really fun as we talk about this becoming a community of allies, that we do that for each other, and when we come with, like, different ideas, that we have to practice within our own little group.
Yeah.
So how are we going to make this decision? This is even about, like, what dates should we do? How should we work out the details, And it does take time. That's the disadvantage to this consensus mode. Yeah. But until everybody agrees, this is a good way to do it. This is a good day. We work until we get to that, so that part is good. And we've recently decided that as a collective, we're we do this at a sliding scale depending on who we're doing it for. We've done 2 for the county, and we're going to continue to do those for the county. We're going to do some for some churches and some other organizations. Well, we all can.
Sometimes a banana is just a banana.
So anyway, the collective is a stronger organizing force than an individual or even a pair, and it's a stronger organizing force than, I'm the one who's in charge here, because that'll only work very shortly.
Well, the systems of privilege are basically collective actions. That's how they operate mostly. So it takes a collective to dismantle a collective.
Yeah, right? and the hierarchy is practice being not in a hierarchy. Just to have those experiences in daily life. What is it like if we have an equal playing field and our ideas and our thoughts are expressed and received in that environment? It feels great. We love it. We're excited about, well, where's it going to go next? We keep getting invitations, and the biggest problem has been too many invitations to do workshops because, we have jobs.
Right.
So, but we're working that out too.
Yeah. Because some of the other pitfalls of doing this work is sometimes you come in, you become the new rock star, the diversity rock stars, and you come in, people feel good for the moment, but then you leave and the status quo reasserts itself unless people are there to do ongoing work to change stuff.
Yeah, and what we do isn't focused on us at all, really. We say little bits about ourselves, and then we go on to facilitate small group exercises and show the film clips and get discussions going. So we try to stay ourselves, be facilitators and stay out of the process and continue to give it back to them. Somebody gives a comment that's shows some of the contradictions, and so anyone else have an answer to that? And if it can come from the group, that's better teaching. The group is more empowered by that. And the last exercise we do is one on becoming a community of allies, which has phrases and actions that I've culled from many different sources that then they get to pick from those, and there's a little sheet at the end where they can commit to something they'll do different, and they sign it. The idea is to hang it up on your wall and really commit to this change and to not do it alone and recognize that it's ongoing, lifetime, collective work.
So that leads, we have like a few minutes left, so the next logical question is, how does an individual begin to take the steps to do this work on their own? Then how do they join you or have their organization bring you, the collective you, as it were, to them to do the work? So first, the individual piece. How do you start?
Like if there was somebody who had sort of a story like mine and they wanted to do something like this.
Individually, how do you start that?
Well, I think going back to our first answers, lots of self-reflection, lots of reading these books by people who have also done a lot of self-reflection. There's many, many of them. There's viewing the Race the Power of an Illusion and working through their study guide is really transformational, because most of that stuff has been pretty hid away from us. Right. And talking to people, both white people who are potential allies and people of color who are, because we sort of, even when we do see privilege, we only see it with sort of blinders on because we see it from a white perspective. And like talking with you about it and hearing from other people of color in our community what it's like for them has really contributed to me expanding my awareness. And it's a very simple process, and I think mainly it's getting past your own defensiveness and desire to be right and not to be embarrassed. You have to get past that, because many times you won't be right and you will be embarrassed. But I found that once most people feel that I'm sincere, I mean, I don't pelt people with questions and I don't ask them to change me, and I got past that. There are many people that are moving in this direction, and so I also think it's a long, slow process. And like with this ladder, you can't jump from the bottom to the top. You know, you can move around and they overlap, but giving it the respect that is due, you know, the task that we're undertaking, you know, how many hundreds of years of this conditioning are we now undoing?
To undo, yeah.
And what's exciting is that, for me, this process is invigorating because it's healing me. And that's why it's so enticing to keep doing it, even though it's more work, but it's every time I do it, I'm a little more healed. And that I can make a contribution to healing our community. That feels really good.
Yeah.
It's worth all that crying and awkwardness that comes earlier.
Well, you moved through that.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you for asking me.
And,
it's been a pleasure.
If you like what you've seen, you can email us at liveclass@lanecc.edu. Put DiversiTV in the subject line, and yeah, we'd be glad to hear from you. And this has been DiversiTV, and tune in next week. Till then, go well, stay well.